Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Saira Mujtaba and with me is Navneet Singh, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expresses gratitude to global leaders for their support towards India's G20 presidency. India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant says India's presidency will seek to advocate oneness of all in accordance with the theme One Earth, One Family, One Future. India and Germany signed migration and mobility agreement for easier access to study, research and work in both countries. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman expresses need for international cooperation to control drugs and other illicit trafficking in India. And in the FIFA World Cup at Qatar, Japan is facing Croatia in pre-quarterfinals. Brazil to take on South Korea for spot in quarterfinals. And now the news in detail. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has expressed gratitude to global leaders for extending their support towards India's G20 presidency. Mr. Modi thanked US President Joe Biden, saying that Mr. Biden's valued support will be a source of strength during India's G20 presidency. Mr. Modi highlighted the importance of working together to build a better planet. The Prime Minister also thanked French President Emmanuel Macron for his support to India's G20 presidency, saying that he looks forward to consulting Mr. Macron closely during the presidency. Responding to a tweet by Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, the Prime Minister said, Mr. Kishida's solidarity is vital as Japan has contributed a lot to global well-being. India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant has said that the priorities of India will not just reflect aspirations of the G20 partners, but also of the global south, whose voice is often unheard. In his keynote address on the second day of the G20 Sherpa meeting in Udaipur on Monday, Mr. Kant said India's presidency will seek to advocate the oneness of all in accordance with the theme One Earth, One Family, One Future. Quoting Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he said the challenges that we face today can only be solved by working together through hope, harmony and healing.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired a meeting with the heads of all major political parties on India's first presidency of the G20 on Monday. Home Minister Amit Shah, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, Parliamentary Affairs Minister Prahlad Joshi, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and other union ministers were present in the meeting. BJP President J.P. Nadda, Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge, Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal, Odisha Chief Minister Naveen Patnaik and West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee were among those who attended the meeting. India took over the presidency of G20 on the 1st of this month. A meeting was held between India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and Federal Foreign Affairs Minister of Germany Annalena Baerbock in New Delhi on Monday. During the meeting, both leaders reviewed bilateral relations and shared their views on a number of important regional and global issues. Both sides have signed a migration and mobility agreement which will facilitate easier access for people to study, research and work in both countries. Addressing a joint conference after the meeting, Dr. Jaishankar said both sides discussed issues related to climate change, conflict in Ukraine, the Indo-Pacific strategic situation, and the situation in Afghanistan, Iran, and Syria. He said both sides also discussed various multilateral reforms, including reform in the UN Security Council. Mr. Jaishankar welcomed Germany's decision to join the India-Pacific Oceans Initiative. He said both sides also discussed creating a more reliable supply chain and securing the global economy in the current challenging situation.
On a broader scale, I think both of us spent time talking about how to create more reliable and resilient supply chains. In the digital world, how to encourage transparency. I think we have a common interest, India and Germany, in ensuring not just a stronger global economy, but also a more secure global economy.
Responding to a question, the External Affairs Minister said, India's trade with Russia is quite small in comparison to European nations. Speaking on the occasion, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said, India and Germany share a close bond. She thanked India for assuming the G20 presidency, terming it a very special task. She said India has assumed the presidency in a very challenging situation when the world is facing the Ukraine-Russia conflict and facing a crisis situation in energy and fertilizer supply. Earlier in a statement, German Foreign Minister Baerbock appreciated India's role in helping G20 in taking a clearer position against the Russia-Ukraine conflict, saying that India showed that it is ready to play a role globally. She said India will have a decisive influence on shaping the international order in the 21st century in the Indo-Pacific region.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on the first G20 Sherpa meeting in Udaipur. The participants are Yogendra Kumar, former ambassador, and Rajesh Lake, AIR correspondent.
Days after India assumed G20 presidency on December 1, Udaipur is all geared up for the G20 Sherpa meeting. G20 guests from various nations received a warm welcome on their arrival in the city of lakes to attend the G20 Sherpa meeting. Rajasthan is known for warm hospitality and historical splendor, and it is a symbolic beginning for G20 to demonstrate the tradition of Atithi Devo Bhava. Mr. Kumar, as I said, a very symbolic beginning for G20 India to start showcasing our Indian tradition of Atithi Devo Bhava from Udaipur in Rajasthan. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, if I might just add one thing, that here actually it is, of course, we are showcasing our culture and our civilization. And in a way, this show the Indian culture and civilization, it will be filtering through across the activity and agenda of under the Indian presidency. Because there are two issues here that I can see. One, of course, is that India is uniquely placed at this moment to assume the presidency of G20 because India, among the larger economies, it has the fastest growth rate. India is a democratic country, as our leaders have said, that democracy is a DNA, and a developing country. So, with these three characteristics of Indian presidency, India is uniquely placed to actually suggest and drive an agenda as to how the global problems, in a way which are very serious, how they can be addressed, keeping in mind our own experience, and also the fact that we have a civilizational legacy, in a way, to back that experience.
As India began its G20 presidency, Mr. Kumar, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said it will work to further promote oneness, inspired by the theme of One Earth, One Family, One Future. And this will be achieved during our reign for 365 days.
Yes, certainly. I think today, sadly, the world is so polarized. Even there are question marks raised about the future of G20 grouping itself. And the fact of the matter is that what the Prime Minister's message really is this, that the world is really globalized. We are so interconnected. The challenges that we face today cannot be handled or addressed by a single country, however powerful that country or however rich that country is, or can escape from the consequences of the global crises which are actually looming ever larger and becoming even more pressing without a kind of a certain culture of dialogue and putting our heads together and our minds together as to how these crises, which actually are upon us, how these crises actually are going to be addressed and how we can all come together. In fact, in one way I can even say, it is something like the 2008 moment when the world, because of the Wall Street crisis, the global economy actually collapsed and the G20 leaders, for the first time, they came together to address the issue as to how the global economy has to put back on its rails. So it's that kind of situation, and I can say how difficult, in a way, the problem today for the G20 is that in the G20, as you know, in Bali, President Putin did not come. He sent his foreign minister, Mr. Lavrov. Mr. Lavrov did not stay till the very end. And the final document, which was actually issued, was not a traditional joint communique, which actually shows that all the leaders are in solidarity to address the current challenges. A leaders' declaration, which is a little more loosely framed kind of a format. And there the Ukraine conflict actually took center stage. And there India's role was such that actually in a way it was able to bring people together, the different countries together, to actually agree on some text, which actually is somewhat diffuse text and somewhat unusual text. But the point is that we are starting with that kind of a background when we are facing the challenges of global warming, for example, a global economy actually in very bad shape. And you find that all these things are affecting the world, is getting polarized. And within countries, this kind of polarization you can see even in the larger countries. Even a country like China, for example, economy actually is stalling and they have a problem with how to manage the COVID crisis. So you see how different kind of challenges are coming together which have larger implications, not just for that country, but globally. And it's happening at a time when even within countries, I mean, the kind of, you hear about internal domestic polarization, a sentiment against globalization that you find in the West. So these are very big issues. And you find at the same time institutional fragility, systemic states collapsing, for example, and conflicts in different parts of the world. In fact, there's one assessment that by 2030, at the current rate, half the world's poor would be living in countries which are either collapsed or are collapsing. So we can imagine how difficult the job becomes to find global solutions, to bring everyone together when the countries are in that kind of a state. So understand how difficult the challenge is. But India is rightly placed for that reason, and that's why the Prime Minister emphasized our civilizational legacy, the fact that we're doing very well economically now, and the fact that we have a traditional democracy where inclusiveness of different opinions, and then to find a common ground to proceed further to address a challenge which faces everyone.
Mr. Kumar, the first Sherpa meeting under India's G20 presidency will set the agenda, and you have stressed upon certain points over here, prominently being the inclusivity aspect of it. The meeting is also to set the agenda for the Leaders Summit in New Delhi next September and provide the country an opportunity to outline its broad priorities. Would you please elaborate on what these priorities would be?
Well, the priorities actually have been laid out by Prime Minister himself at his closing speech at the G20 Bali Summit. He talked that Indian leadership would be to regenerate an inclusive, ambitious, decisive and action-oriented approach, a sense of trusteeship over resources. Because trusteeship means that you actually hold the resources in trust and not with a sense of possessiveness, which leads to conflict. Then various issues, have been highlighted by our G20 Sherpa. The issues like climate, digitalization of economies, health is a very big issue. The other issues like MSMEs, marginal farmers, sustainable energy transitions, sustainable development goals of the United Nations, supply chain risks, disaster risk management, a whole lot of plastic waste, eco-offenders, terrorism, multilateralism, resilient societies, sustainable lifestyles, education, nutrition. So all these things actually have been talked as to what will be the key points in our agenda. So the first which will be taking place is when these agenda items will be introduced for a broader discussion. And as the chair, India is in a position to lead the discussion. First set the agenda, then to lead the discussion, and then to find consensus amongst all the participating delegates to actually arrive at a position which will then prepare the ground for the Leaders Summit, which will take place next year in September. But it's a long process. You have the Sherpa track and you have the Finance Minister's track. Now, the Finance Minister's track actually deals with global financial stability. It deals with resilient financial infrastructure and a whole lot of issues like that. Taxation. So there are a lot of these issues. And then, of course, we have the aspect of public diplomacy, where you have different groups like the think tanks from these countries, the parliamentarians from these countries, youth, labor, gender issues, and a whole lot of them. And in fact, under our initiative, we introduced the startup as one of the groups which actually is discussing startup as to how, you can ignite or develop or the entrepreneurial spirit amongst the larger population, not just the top sort of capitalists.
The meeting will also kickstart with a panel discussion, as you rightly pointed out, on accelerating the implementation of SDGs. And also India will introduce the broad priorities of all working groups and hear viewpoints of the G20 countries, the guests and international organizations. So what do you expect? What would India like the outcome to be?
Well, I think the SDGs, which actually are supposed to be achieved by 2030, they are a very critical aspect of, let us say, the direction in which India wants the G20 to go. And these are very wide-ranging issues. They are democracy, they are public health, they are nutrition, they are environment, they are reducing social and economic inequality. And so it's a very, very sort of ambitious and a broad agenda where there has been progress, but by concentrating and showcasing and spotlighting as to how India's experience has been, let us say, in achieving the SDG goals, those kind of things. And of course, you take input from other countries because you are sharing experience. Because the Prime Minister has said that it is actually India is not being India there, it represents global South. So you bring together the aspirations and the experiences of the developing countries to actually achieve these. And then, of course, there are other issues that they'll be concerned about how the multilateral organization should be working to sort of, in a way, to shield supply of food, fuel and fertilizers from these kind of geopolitical and geoeconomic shocks. So these are very ambitious agendas. You have tourism, you have culture, you have, as I said, inclusive, resilient growth, green transition, how we are going to move from carbon intensive to no carbon or renewable energy based economy, how we are going to the technological transformation, because technology today actually is a double-edged weapon. It is actually very good for society and economic growth, but it also has very dangerous downside. I mean, as for example, you have seen recently in the AIMS when the server was hacked. So the other challenges which actually, the fake meat, what I call the deep fakes, for example, and goes on and on. There are so many things actually where one can actually say the danger, the bioweapons, for example. All of these are actually very, very critical issues. So how are we going to make the technological transformation for the development of the world, the global community, whilst actually making sure that its downside or this negative side actually is minimized, or in one way it is controlled in such a way that it does not act as a destabilizing force in the growth of the global community.
As the Prime Minister took the opportunity in Bali and said he would like to promote the program of climate change, saying it could make a big contribution by turning sustainable living into a mass movement. We look forward to what happens in the remaining days of the G20 Sherpa meeting in Udaipur. In the meanwhile, thank you so much, Mr. Yogendra Kumar, for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news.
Union Minister for State for Atomic Energy and Space, Dr. Jitendra Singh, has said that India is keenly promoting the development of startups in the space sector to facilitate the entry of foreign government and private sector entities. Addressing the opening ceremony of the United Arab Emirates Summit, Abu Dhabi Space Debate, the minister said the Indian space industry on Monday is renowned across the globe for reliability and economy. Mr. Singh added that the highlight of India's journey is its thrust on indigenous development through the dedication and hard work of its scientists, guided by the commitment of the leaders. He also expressed pride over India having the maximum success ratio in the world for its flagship space launch vehicle, Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, or PSLV. The minister also congratulated the UAE for planning its second human space mission next year by sending 4 astronauts into space for 6 months. He also appreciated the thrust of the Abu Dhabi Space Debate for building the role of governments in empowering space business and technology. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has expressed the need for international cooperation to control drugs and other illicit trafficking in the country. Speaking at the 65th founding day of the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence in New Delhi on Monday, the minister said it is important to work in tandem with fellow countries and their agencies for which India has bilateral agreements for better access to information. The minister also called upon the officers of the departments for better use of technology to detect crime.
I've been closely monitoring the detection of smuggling in India, particularly of drugs and of gold. I briefly saw a connect, but there seems to be some kind of a relationship between when smuggling gets detected. There is an indication that there is more smuggling of a particular item, in this case gold, high import at some point in time in the year. There seems to also be a higher detection of smuggling. The DRI officers see that there's more imports happening and gets more cautious.
The minister added that protecting data is as important as protecting the border. She also raised concerns over the cocaine smuggling in India, and it is a matter of great concern. She said that we need to know whether India becomes no longer a transit country or a consuming one.
The first round of Foreign Office consultations between India and Papua New Guinea was held in Port Moresby on Monday. The Indian side was led by Secretary East Saurabh Kumar. During the consultations, both the sides reviewed the entire gamut of bilateral relations, including development partnerships and political, economic and cultural ties. The two sides exchanged views on regional and global issues and cooperation in multilateral fora. They also discussed the joint hosting by the two countries of the third summit of the Forum for Indo-Pacific Islands Cooperation to be held in Port Moresby. Eurozone business activity has declined for a fifth month in November. A fifth consecutive monthly falling output suggests that the Eurozone economy was sliding into a mild recession as consumers are cutting spending and amid surging inflation. S&P Global's final composite purchasing managers index PMI for the Eurozone, seen as a good guide to economic health, nudged up to 47.8 in November from October's 23-month low of 47.3. Unemployment in the region dipped to 6.5% in October. The European Central Bank has been raising interest rates to tame price rises.
In Bangladesh, air pollution was the second largest cause of death and disability in Bangladesh and cost about 3.9 to 4% of the country's GDP. According to a World Bank report released on Sunday, air pollution caused the death between 78,000 to 88,000 people in 2019. The report finds that major construction sites and persistent traffic have the highest level of pollution in Dhaka. Dhaka is the most polluted division, while Sylhet is the least polluted. From 2018 to 2021, Dhaka was ranked as the second most polluted city in the world. 5th December is the death anniversary of Chrysostomus Wolfgangus Theophilus Mozart, who was a prolific and influential composer of the classical period. Despite his short life, his rapid pace of composition resulted in more than 800 works of virtually every genre of his time. Born in Salzburg, Austria on 27 January 1756 in the Holy Roman Empire, Mozart showed prodigious ability from his earliest childhood. Already competent on keyboard and violin, he composed from the age of 5 and performed before European royalty. His father took him on a grand tour of Europe and then 3 trips to Italy. At 17, he was a musician at the Salzburg court. His Requiem was largely unfinished by the time of his death at the age of 35 on this day in 1791. A tribute.
Serious music lovers have probably heard of the Mozart effect. It's the idea that if children or even babies listen to music composed by Mozart, they will become more intelligent. Mozart conceived and perfected the grand forms of symphony, opera, string ensemble and concerto that marked the classical period. His work influenced many composers that followed, most notably Beethoven, along with his friend Joseph Haydn, and definitely Indian composer Salil Chaudhary. The melody of the great G minor Symphony No. 40 inspired Salilda because it touched all the notes of the Indian octave. Sunil Dutt and Asha Parekh's melody of love and longing, Itna Na Mujhse Tu Pyar Badha in Chhaya movie, sung by Talat Mahmood and Lata Mangeshkar, derived from Symphony No. 40 at some points and became a romantic anthem for generations. Here Salil Chaudhary demonstrated how the scales and chords that form the base of Western classical music are all part of Hindustani classical ragas.
इतना न मुझसे तू प्यार बढ़ा कि मैं एक बादल आवारा कैसे किसी का सहारा बनूं कि मैं खुद बेघर बेचारा.
His last creation, Requiem in D minor K626, remained incomplete at his death. Until the late 20th century, the work was most often unheard as it was later completed by Mozart's student Franz Xaver Süssmayr. With Pratyush Ghosh, this is Valsa Williams for Parikrama.
And now a report from the business desk.
The Sensex fell 34 points to close at 62,835, while the Nifty added 5 points to end at 18,701. At the global stock markets, the indices traded mixed amid little support from an easing of China's domestic pandemic restrictions and the US jobs data on Friday that raised fears of persistent inflation. Asian equity market logged gains except South Korea's Kospi, which declined 0.6%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index climbed 4.5%. China's Shanghai Composite Index rose 1.8%. Singapore's Straits Times added 0.3% and Japan's Nikkei 225 ended 0.2% up. European shares were mixed in intraday trade. Global crude oil prices rose around 3%. Oil rose after OPEC Plus nations held their output targets steady ahead of a European Union ban and a price cap by G7 on Russian crude. Brent crude was trading at $87.90 per barrel. Back home at the multi-commodity exchange, gold futures for February were trading at 54,110 rupees per 10 grams. Silver futures for March were trading at 66,830 rupees per kilogram when reports last came in. Gaurang Dhawanlal for World News, All India Radio.
On to sports now. In the FIFA World Cup football, the pre-quarter-final match between Japan and Croatia in the round of 16 has gone to extra time, with the teams tied at 1-1 at Al Janoub Stadium in Qatar. The match will see the two sides further playing two halves of 15 minutes each. If they still cannot be separated, the winner will be decided by a penalty shootout. In another knockout encounter, Brazil will take on South Korea for a spot in the quarter-finals later at 12:30 a.m. Indian time. England, France, Argentina and the Netherlands have already sealed their spot in the last 8 of the tournament. National Zoological Park Delhi Zoo celebrated International Cheetah Day and Wildlife Conservation Day in New Delhi on Sunday. The purpose of the celebration is to spread awareness among the present generation about wildlife conservation.
World Soil Day is being observed on Monday. It is held annually on 5th December as means to focus attention on the importance of healthy soil and to advocate for the sustainable management of soil resources. Let us now take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Wall Street Journal writes, OPEC Plus keeps oil curbs despite Russia price cap. The Financial Times reports Canada to send more warships through Taiwan Strait to signal to China. The Guardian writes, the campaigners celebrate changing of colonial street names in Berlin. The Washington Post writes that Ukraine allows perilous Dnieper River crossings to flee Russian occupation. Al Jazeera writes in an opinion piece, China's protests are a warning to Xi Jinping from the youth.
And a quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expresses gratitude to global leaders for their support towards India's G20 presidency. India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant says India's presidency will seek to advocate oneness of all in accordance with the theme One Earth, One Family, One Future. India and Germany signed migration and mobility agreement for easier access to study, research and work in both countries. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman expresses need for international cooperation to control drugs and other illicit trafficking in India. And in the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, Japan facing Croatia in pre-quarterfinals, Brazil to take on South Korea for a spot in quarterfinals. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Cambodia. We end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.